With that, I'm going to introduce Sarah Clark, our speaker today. Sarah is the most, I've been with our organization the longest at this point. And
elderly.
So
Antique.
I didn't say elderly.
I am not the oldest.
No, you aren't.
But she is exceptional standing with our program, and just really a go-getter. And so we're pleased to have her. So with that, I'm going to introduce Sarah Clark. Sarah, you can take it away.
All right. Well, okay. Welcome to Vegetable Gardening 101. I do need to stress a couple things. This program is entertaining for everyone who does gardening. However, it is aimed at people who are beginning gardening or need to have some advice for sort of the beginning level of gardening. So I'm hoping that people who are here who have more experience will just be entertained and feel free to point out my errors. So let's see if I can get it to go. Okay, there we go. It's moving. And here's our shameless plug for our plant sale in Tomato-Palooza on the 14th from 8 to 3. Please come early, even if you have to stand. It will maybe possibly be raining, but not too much per hour so far. Anyway, it is an amazing thing to see, and we would hope that everyone has a chance to go there. Now, this is the most important slide because this has the link to how to get to our webpage, because you're going to have a ton of questions about what to do. And you're going to say, well, I want to know more about this, or I want to know more about that. So let me show you. When you click on this and you get to our webpage, the key is this Learn with Us. And you can see it's kind of buried in this plant. And sometimes it's over here on the right with a little 3-bar hamburger menu. And when you click that, you scroll down and you notice a section on vegetable gardening. So on this area, it has many resources. So if you're interested in that, I suggest that you go there. And so when you have a lot of questions and you're frustrated that I didn't cover everything, which I can't, that's where you go. So let's see, this should bring us back to our slideshow from the current slide. Okay, does everybody see that Learn with Us Cowlitz MG slide? I hope. Okay, so we have a poll for you, and hopefully Gary can get this going. And the poll is, how much gardening do you know? And here are some of the options. And it's up and running, so you can go ahead and have you planted a seed in a cup in kindergarten a long time ago? Maybe a few plants. You've had a vegetable garden for maybe a year. You have quite a bit of experience, or you feel like you actually have some advanced gardening skills. Go ahead and choose now. And you have about 12 seconds. Quick.
It is strictly anonymous. We don't know who pulls in, so.
Okay.
We're at 30 out of 36, so just about 5 seconds. And I'm gonna call it. So there you go.
Okay, so we have quite a few people in the middle of the pile. A couple people who feel they have advanced gardening skills. And if you aren't a master gardener already, perhaps you'd be interested in becoming one. I would say that back when I started master gardening, I was more in the 2 to 3 range myself. So I did grow as a kid. All right, so can you close? Thank you. Okay. All right, so that was our thing. This is what we're going to talk about today. Why should you grow vegetables? Where should you locate your garden? How to prepare the soil? Choosing some varieties that work very well for us. Whether, what's the difference between seeds and transplants? What's the advantages and disadvantages of those? When to plant? What are some common tools that will help you? What about irrigating and maintaining your garden? And then what do you do with the harvest? So why should you grow vegetables? Well, a garden can supply you with fresh, healthy vegetables. Great. It can beautify your landscape. It can allow you to enjoy varieties not offered in stores. So that's pretty interesting, that you could get some varieties that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. It can keep you active and fit and out in the fresh air, which is great. And it can help you meet new people. And when you meet them, you might want to be very generous because you might grow an extra large zucchini like this and want to get rid of it, please. So if you're ever in that position, you know what that's like. But wait a minute, what about saving money? Uh, Everybody says, "Well, I want to grow vegetables because it's going to save me money." And people who've gardened for a long time kind of laugh because we tend to overdo it. But let's take a look at that. It is possible. Okay, so you can, from one package of broccoli, grow many, many, and a package of broccoli seeds would be like $3, $4, and you can grow a ton. But unfortunately, they might all ripen at the same time. So you could save money in other ways. Your top quality vegetables are actually cheaper and better quality because you're able to pick them right at the right moment than even what a fancy store like Whole Foods Market offers. So you would be getting high quality vegetables for less because you're able to pick them and know what's going on. You also get free exercise, which we hope you are safe about. You don't hurt yourself, but you do. You get a lot of exercise. If you have a step counter and you garden, you know what I'm talking about. But you want to try not to do too much. Okay, if you get carried away because you're going to save all this money, you may end up wasting a lot if you overburden yourself. And full disclosure, gardening can be very addicting. You know, who are we? We're gardeners. What do we want? All the plants. Where will we put them? We don't know, but we still want them. So you want to be careful of not overburdening yourself with more things than you can deal with. But you do get positive advantages that are actually worth money, that are maybe not necessarily just saving money. You can save money though. Okay, so let's say you've decided, fine, I'm going to spend a little money. Where should I put my garden? So the number one thing to consider is, what do you want to grow? What about your sun exposure? This is just sort of a broad overview of this section. What about your space? That's very important. You only have so much space. What's your soil like? What's the drainage like? What kind of garden structure do you want? Like ground, other things. How convenient is it to you that you would get to this garden and deal with it? And how much it costs? Okay, so you want to know where to put your garden. What are you willing to eat? So this is your decision. You have to make all these decisions before you can even decide where to put the garden. So I like to eat watermelon, and I have yet to ripen a watermelon in my yard. Cantaloupe I finally got last year. Thank you, Heat Dome. How much are you willing to eat? So if you plant 15 broccoli plants, you're going to get 15 broccoli like all at the same time. So you might want to figure out ways to stagger that. What's your plans for the food? Just eating it, yes, but is there further plans? I plant a lot of tomatoes because I can a lot of tomatoes. You're thinking of ways to take care of them. Spacing. How much space are you going to have? If you have too many for a space, you might think, I'm going to look at some compact varieties that will put out food but not take up so much space. What kind of watering needs am I going to have? And is it even possible, successful to grow this thing here? For instance, bananas. I don't think you can grow a banana in Longview. I really don't. But I'm sure somebody is trying. And I've seen banana trees, and I've seen little baby bananas, but they don't seem to get ripen. All right, here's the key thing. Where do you have the best sun? Because most vegetable crops require at least 6 hours of direct sunlight every day. What if you have no place that has direct sun? No real sunny spot. My suggestion to you is this: move. Because you're going to be frustrated. However, I would also recommend that you look at your driveway, because often that's a quite sunny spot, and you could maybe do container gardeners there. You could move your garden. You could try doing the community garden spaces. You could try gardening at a friend's house. I've had people garden on my property for years. You could try gardening at an enemy's house because you might become friends. So how much space are you going to need? Well, you got to remember the roots. If you see this picture of a tomato, you'll notice that the size of the roots is the same size as the plant. So when you have a 3-foot tall tomato plant, you have a ton of roots down under the ground. And one time I tried to grow an upside down tomato in a 5-gallon bucket. And unfortunately, the 5-gallon bucket wasn't enough space for the roots to grow very well for me. Other people grow a smaller variety than I tried though, and they can work. Or you can grow them right side up in a 5-gallon bucket. But you need to be considering the roots. So consider the plant's needs, read the seed packet, and believe the seed packet. My brother doesn't read the seed packet, and he likes to plant lettuce. Maybe turn off your microphone for a second there. Like just a thick swath down the row, and he's always surprised it doesn't work very well. Tomatoes need a lot of space, carrots need less. So you have to think, how much do you need? And compact varieties. There's squash that go for 10 feet in all directions and squash that stay in a 4-foot space. So think about that. Okay, what's your soil and drainage like? I hope it's better than this. My yard can get water in the winter above ground, but in the summer it's not bad. Vegetables require fertile, well-drained soil, so keep that in mind. If it's too wet, you might consider raising your garden bed up with a raised bed of some kind or putting them in containers. If it's not easy to dig, if the dirt is not very good, you need to work in some organic matter, also known as compost. Another thing you need to consider is what's the nutrients already in your soil, and you can use a soil test like this. And they tend to give you your pH level because certain plants like certain pHs. And they tend to show you what your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are. And those are those magic NPK numbers. So when you go to a fertilizer, they're always in the same order. Nitrogen is the first number, phosphorus is the second one, and potassium's the third one. And when I did my soil test, I discovered I had plenty of potassium. You may discover something different. But generally, nitrogen is the thing that your garden is going to need to help it be successful. And often that gets used up with the previous season. So if you really want to know what the best fertilizer is, you need to get your soil tested and then follow the recommendations. I can't tell you on a Zoom call what your particular situation needs. So when you need a soil test that's more complicated and more detailed, you might want to consider somebody like these people. Simply Soil Testing is a company, and you can see their prices, and this is maybe not their most current prices, but you get an idea that for a basic test, $16, or how much organic matter you already have, they throw that in for $20. And I think they're very good. I haven't used them myself, but several people have. So that's an option, just getting a professional test done. And then I would feel more confident than my interpretation of holding the little dial, a little tube up to the chart and guessing. So I probably am going to do this year because I think it's so interesting. Okay, so here's some great advice. When you plant your garden each year though, once you've planted a garden, avoid planting the same type of plants in the same place every year. Do not be like my brother. He's stubborn this way. He planted tomatoes in the same place and beans in the same place and everything in the same place every year for 30 years. And he couldn't figure out why things started to just go downhill. The problem is that the pathogens and problems build up, and then they just wait for you to put the same plant in the same place so they're ready to go and attack and do what they need to do. So rotate. So one suggested rotation is to maybe start with some lettuce type plants and move on to some bean type plants, because beans put nitrogen in the ground the way they grow. And then a fruit, which maybe has more demands, and then maybe a root vegetable, and then back around. So you can do this, or there's also these programs you can get that the vegetable garden planning programs, where when you try to put the little picture of your carrot on that particular spot, it lights up and says, wait, you did that already last year, so don't do that here. And it will help you avoid putting things in the same places. So there's many of these kind of charts out there, and you can follow any rotation you want, or you can I just put things in different places every year, and it seems to work out. But you want to make sure you're not planting the same. Don't be like my brother. And good thing he's not here to listen to me talk about him. Your garden structures. All right, so you've decided to put in a garden. Now, what kind of physical garden are you going to put in? One option, rototilling. Okay, positive points. You don't have to build beds. You can grind in the compost into the dirt, get it mixed in. You can change your configuration every year, just plow up more lawn or something. But it does cost to rent or buy or borrow a tiller. And the ground might be too wet. If you rototill before it's dried out, you're going to get clumps, and they're going to be very hard to control. And it takes time and effort and energy to rototill, and it's physical work. So if you can mute, please, that would be great. Garden structure choice number 2 is containers. And these are nice because you don't have to build something permanent. And if you're renting, they're particularly nice. Bigger is better. You can control the soil this way. You need to have drainage. Make sure they've got a way for the water to get out. And you can locate them pretty much anywhere. I had mine on my deck, and I had these big heavy pots, and then I moved them and discovered I'd rotted out my deck. So you might want to be a little cautious of that. The key to the containers, though, is you need a water reservoir. So I have very big dishes that are 2 or 3 inches deep that I put my pots in, and that gives the water flows out in there, and then the plant can suck it back up again. Or this particular one on the right, it has a built-in reservoir down in the bottom, and you need a significant reservoir. None of this little half-inch tall little trays. It has to be quite hefty so that it puts enough water out there and sucks it back up, so you don't have to keep the eye on the watering quite as close. Okay, option number 3, raised beds. Very popular. They're a good investment. They can last years. They solve all your drainage issues because your soil is up. You can control the soil and the fertility. It can cost. It's kind of a negative. And you need some construction skills, or at least some handy friends, so that you can get them put together and built. You can buy them also, but generally people, it's hard to buy them big enough, and people like to build them themselves sometimes. So here's some options. You can do the metal-sided ones. All wood. Wood and soil and water creates rot. So just be aware that you're probably going to have to replace these after a time. This is what I do. I do treated wood around and I only have about 6 feet high, and it works really great. And occasionally I have to replace these. Or you can do cement, but I need to warn you that cement blocks love gravity, and they might fall over unless you do something to hold them in place. If they're just sitting here like this, they just decide to move, or they just like to jump. So you need to know that. And probably the nicest raised bed is just to have a mound of dirt. And that's the cheapest, and you can maybe change the configuration if you don't like how it is year to year. And the word at the bottom says hugelkultur beds. These are layered beds, and we have an example in our demo garden. So you might want to look into those as an option. And you layer different materials in the bed, and it makes a nice raised bed for you. Convenience. Please, please, please put your garden where you see it every day. The number one thing you can do to be successful is to visit your garden every single day and do little things. You notice that this leaf has a disease, you can take it off. You notice that the things are getting dry, you can water them. These people put theirs in their front yard. And I've seen that a couple of them on Lilac Street. There's some front yard garden beds. And often your front yard has a lot of sun, because people tend to just have it be grass and be out there for people to see. So why not plant a vegetable garden? Also, please have it near some water. In my property is about 300 feet deep. And for 7 years, we ran a hose from my house 200 feet back or more to the garden spaces and had to return to the house to turn it on and off and then go out to the garden and then come back and forth because we had a leak in our outdoor watering system. Don't be like me. Get water closer. We did get it fixed. Finally, it's heaven. We could just turn on our water and we're good to go. So close to water, very important. Okay, what about costs? It's hard to estimate the costs of gardening in general. In general, before you buy something really major, you might want to rent it or try it out. Start with container gardenings before you go to raised beds. If you think you're just taking a little bit of time to get into this, start smaller. You can look for cheaper or free options. You can share with friends. Maybe they grow 15 broccoli plants and give you half, and you start some basil and you give them half, and that way you each have only had to buy one packet of seeds. You can go to sales. Oh, did I mention we have a plant sale on the 14th, and you should come buy plants from us. It's cheap. They're cheap. Okay, so you decided to garden, you figured out your configuration, you know what you're using, and you have to do something to make sure the soil is good for the plants. So every year you need to work in some organic matter, also known as compost or other plant matter. You can use a shovel, you can use a rototiller. In my raised beds, I can use that small rototiller right in my raised beds, and that's been the go-to way for me. You can make your own compost. That's great. You can make worm composting, and composting is a full class you can take from us. Worm composting is a full class you can take from us. And we even can help you do sheet mulching, which is where you lay organic matter on the surface and let it rot in. And then as you plant the next year, you just kind of work it in as you go. And we give away leaves. We have a leaf exchange in November where people bring bags of leaves because they have too many, and other people come and take them away to do something like this with them, to lay them on the surface of their gardens to help add organic matter. Okay, so you got your soil ready. It is time to choose what to put in it. Things to consider. Will it grow well for you? If it's something that needs to be watered 4 times a day and you don't plan on watering more than a couple times a week, maybe that won't work well for you. What about it? Will it work in your space? You have a giant squash and you plan to plant 20 in there, you might want to reconsider the size options. Will it ripen in time? Okay, famous tomatoes, hard to ripen in our area. So you don't want to end up with all green tomatoes. Some are okay. You can bring them in and ripen them on your counter, but they just don't taste as good. So you might want to look at the dates from transplant date, so that if you have something that says it'll grow after it's come up and started, then it's going to be 65 days. Then that's pretty good for a tomato for our area. But if it's going to be 100 and some days to ripen, then that might not work as well. So you need to look at that kind of thing. How long is it going to take for it to get done? Does it need support? Maybe you don't want to have a bunch of supports, or you have no way to make supports. So you don't want to grow like pole beans or tomatoes, because they need support. If you plant peas, they need support. You can't just grow peas and just have them drape on the ground. That is a miserable experience. Not that I would ever know anything about that, except for last year when they crawled all over. It's a much easier if you use supports. Okay, so you're looking at your whole picture. What do you want? Is it going to ripen? Do you have what it is going to take? Okay, what about seeds and transplants? If you do seeds, they're much cheaper. It's best to buy seeds for the Pacific Northwest. Here's a couple companies that specialize in seeds for our area that ripen in time. Territorial is one, and Ed Hume is another, and there's many, many other options. But you need to watch out for those seeds that are set for South Dakota, which has 100-degree days every day. So watch out for that. Fresh seed is better than older seed, but can you use your older seed? And the answer is yes, but if you store them right, it will help a lot. And germination is when you put the seed in the ground and it actually turns into a plant. So if you store your seeds in a cool, dark place, that's helpful. But you're still going to expect lower germination from old seed. And if you want to kind of test it before you waste the time planting it, you might want to wrap it in a damp paper towel, put it in a little baggie or a Ziploc bag to make a little greenhouse and see if any of them sprout. And if they all sprout, then you're all good. And if only half of them sprout, then you should just plant twice as many and then thin out extras. So it's just it's hard to throw away seeds. So watch out for how you store them though. Be not like my brother. This is how he plants lettuce in a wad, and he doesn't thin them. And then he doesn't like how they turn out. Thinning is your friend. So be sure you give the plants room to grow. That's probably the number 2 thing that most people do. The number 1 thing is they don't plant things in the right place. Okay, so how can you plant seeds and not have to thin quite so much? Well, you can try the seed packet where you see they've pinched it and you try to tap the seeds out one at a time. I try that. I'm not very good at it. It's better than my brother, but it's a little hard. Or you could use pelleted seed where you can physically take a tiny seed that's been wrapped in a kind of a clay mixture and you can just put it in the row where you want it. So that's kind of nice, but not all seeds come that way, and it's more expensive. Or you can use tools like this. You can use a little ruler, and you can actually plant the seeds in the spots and then move the ruler. Or you can make your own seed tape out of toilet paper. You can just go online. There's lots of YouTube videos on how to do this, but I would recommend you do it in short sections because one time I made a seed tape of carrots that was 30 feet long. And as I tried to put it in the row, the rest of the tape turned into a sail and tried to fly away and yank the tape out of the row, and it was awkward to deal with. So that's the recommendation. So this is a cool idea. And you can get these little tapes going in the winter when you're sitting around wishing you could garden, and then they're ready to go. Okay. So, how deep should you plant seeds? This is an interesting question. These are the answers I got from various experts. Number 1, look on the packet. If you have the packet, just follow the packet. But if for some reason you don't, I've heard 2 times the diameter of the seed. I've heard 4 times the narrowest dimension. I've heard 2 to 3 times the largest dimension. I've heard as deep as they are wide. So my best suggestion is if it's a small seed, plant it shallower. If it's a larger seed, you can plant it deeper. And too deep is worse than too shallow. So, but if you have the packet, please just follow the packet directions. That's your best option. So, what about transplants? Well, it saves weeks of time. So that is fantastic. Tomatoes are the number 1 example for this. And it gives you instant gratification because, wow, you have plants in the garden and it looks so great after just an afternoon of planting. But it does cost more. So if you try transplants for everything, it could cost you too much money. And then there's this little issue. First we get a plant, then we get another plant. Then we say, no more plants. But then we find another plant. So we get 2 more plants. Oh, it's so fantastic. You got to watch out for that. Okay, what about we keep talking about growing things here. So our climate, how does that affect when to plant? Can I go out today and put my tomatoes in the ground? Please, please, please. I need to know this. I need to know the answer. Okay, so here is something you need to know. We have mild, wet winters and hot, dry summers, except when it's not normal. So that's generally our climate. And where rainfall, of course, in the summer months when you have your garden growing, you're going to have to irrigate because you can see how little rainfall we really have. In fact, Tucson, Arizona gets more rain in the summer than we do. Okay, granted, they only get 2 inches, but we only get 1. So, just saying. It's a problem. That watering is a problem. And don't forget, June 29th of last year, we had that monster heat dome. So you got to have a plan for that. I hope not, but maybe it would work. Okay, so when should you start your garden? Well, you can look at charts like this that have, where do you live and what's the different temperature ranges, and they tell you things like the number of days it's not going to freeze is between 151 and 180 days a year. Okay, well, that's interesting. The last time you should see freezing weather is between April 16th and the 5th and May 1st. And the first day that everything's going to freeze and die is in October to the start of November. Well, okay. Well, we seem to be past when it's going to freeze, we hope. You need to know that on April 6th of this year, we had ice, a freeze hard enough to form ice on a dish that you could pick up. So that's pretty heavy freeze. And of course, on April 11th, we had this little snow event. So don't don't try to plant things too early. That really is the advice that I would give you. You can look at lists like this that say, oh, these plants like warm weather, 50-degree weather to grow, or you can look at these. They can handle cooler temperatures. There's our friend broccoli, potatoes, rhubarb is coming up fine in my yard. But here's the key. It's really best to use a soil temperature. And you go out there and you put it in the ground and say, all right, how warm is my soil right now where I live? And you get things like this, where if the soil is 40 degrees, you can plant things like radishes, carrots, cabbage. If the soil is 50 degrees, then it's okay to put tomatoes in. And I went out and stabbed a thermometer into my yard, and it was about 45 degrees in my soil. So it's too early for me to plant tomatoes where I am. We have to have some warming up of the ground, and it doesn't fluctuate as much as the air temperature does. So that's helpful. And you can use an instant thermometer. They are about 10 to 20 bucks at the most. And you're going to stick it in the dirt, so don't buy a real fancy one. But they work just fine. You can also kind of cheat a little. Maybe you can get the plant in the ground, but you need to get something. You need to stretch the season a little, because maybe you want to grow that tomato that really takes a little bit longer. So transplants can help because they're grown for weeks and weeks before you put them in the ground. So that helps. Also, plastic tunneling can help. The sun can radiate the ground and keep it warmer, which the plants like. You want to watch out that you don't burn your plants, because it get quite hot in there. And another option is this stuff called floating row covers, which is similar to dryer sheet material. And you drape them right over the plants, and they can warm the ground a little bit and warm the air a little bit under there. And they also can keep insects away, unless, of course, you trap the insects under there with them, and then they have a field day, so to speak. So those are some options. And if you want to know more about that, we have some information on our website about those. Okay, all you really need for gardening is some basic tools. You need a basic hoe for weeding, a rake for smoothing the soil, a shovel if you need to dig anything, but the best tool in the world is a tool like this. My kids call that my bayonet. And it is good for digging and making rows, and it is just the best tool ever. Some people call it a hori knife, but I would recommend you have one of those. And all the rest of them are just fun to have, but these are the basics. So when you're watering, you finally have everything in and it's time to water. I would like you to avoid overhead watering. It gets water on all the plants. The leaves might start to develop some diseases or funguses. And it wastes a lot of water. So if you use a hand waterer and you use a wand, you can direct the flow to the bottom of the plant. You can go along and put it exactly as much as each one needs, and you can save a lot of water. It does take more time to do that, though. But you're out there. You want to spend time in your garden. And drip irrigation is awesome. If you can set up some drip irrigation, it can be on a timer, and every plant gets just the right amount of water, and it saves you so much time and energy. It is amazing. So those are some good options. How do you know when to water? Just stick your finger in the ground and see if it's moist. If it is, you're pretty good. If it's getting dry, or you can't put your finger in because it's too crusted, it's probably time to water. What about weeding? the weeds compete with your plants for the lights and nutrients, and they have nothing better to do with their entire life than total world domination. They will never give up, and they are not your friend. So when the plants are young, weed often, but gently, and keep those weeds out of there, because your little plants need to get up and get above the weeds and maybe even shade them out. So you want to avoid this. Okay, and I did not, this is not my garden picture, but it could have been. You want to avoid that, because then you're ripping out weeds and ripping out the plants too. Okay, you're getting to the end. You're ready to pick them. When is it ripe? My best suggestion is go out and try them. And some vegetables don't hold well, so you got to make sure you get them when they're ripe and not past ripe. So like tomatoes can rot and fall off, and cabbage can crack. I planted a cabbage. It was beautiful. And the very next day I came out and it had split wide open because it had over ripened. And that was kind of frustrating. Other plants are more forgiving. You can keep carrots in the ground over winter and they will sit out there and get chilled with the cold weather and even taste better. But you want to avoid having the tops exposed in the dirt like that because they will turn green and they're not good to eat. They just taste good. So keep them covered. And you want to pick them before maybe February or so, because then all kinds of things get in there and start eating them. So, but it's fun to go out in the winter and pick carrots in your garden. So when you want to take care of it, what are you going to do with it? It's best to eat them fresh, which is awesome. But vegetables can be refrigerated, dried, frozen, canned. I do want to say this though. Please, when canning vegetables, follow the recommendations. Look up how to can vegetables, because vegetables, if you can them improperly, can develop botulism, and that could be very serious. So you want to make sure you're following the current recommendations. And some vegetables are different pressures and all kinds of things. So be cautious of canning vegetables and know what you're doing. Okay, you made it. You grew your garden. Aren't you great? You're amazing. You will be more and more successful each year as you learn what works. And so now you know why, where, the soil, what varieties, seeds and transplants, when to plant, the tools, irrigation and maintenance, and harvesting. And here are some references if you would like to look these up. Both of these are fairly hefty references, and just looking at them is very complete, especially the OSU one is quite complete. And they're free, and they're on our website. And here's our link again to our personal website and where you can get things. And thank you so much. And there's our contact information. And now, are there any questions?
Of course there's questions.
Shall I stop sharing?
You can.
Okay. Now I see all your happy faces.
The first one I can answer. Which fairgrounds for plant sale? Cowlitz County Fairgrounds.
Right.
Building 13.
Yes. So when you come in, if you know where the expo building is, this requires north, south, east, and west.
Sarah, there's a map on the fairground or on the website, and I put that on the in the chat.
Excellent. Okay.
Excellent. Alice has got us covered.
I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I don't know which way direction is north. My family grew up in South Dakota, and they always refer to the north side, the south side. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Alice also put in the slot, if you're looking at the Simply Soil Testing site, Alice put that in there. Thank you, Alice.
Yep.
Karen asked, in general, is soil in a raised bed warmer or cooler than the soil
warmer.
in the ground?
Generally warmer. It warms up faster. But testing is a good idea. Getting a temperature testing.
And that's the only question that I have, because you were just so awesomely complete on that. Anybody else have any other questions? Please speak up.
Can you come to my garden and pretend that you're much better than your brother?
Oh, my brother. Bless his heart. I'm telling you that I've spent more time in the summer on my hands and knees with my face about this far away from his carrots, lying with my elbows on either, just like down next to it and pulling apart the carrots. And, you know, there's a better way to do that, I found out. You just take little scissors and cut off the ones in between, and they don't grow anymore and they're thinned. Thanks for telling me that, Internet, about 10 years after I was doing that.
Rachel asked the question, how do you know what kind of sun you get?
If you're in the shade, that it sometimes has a little filtering of sun through it. And I'm laughing because that's my adorable daughter asking that question. You go out and you visit the garden space at various times to see if it's directly in the sun or if there's shade on things. And mine has an orchard planted around it, so that different times, different trees are shading different parts of the garden.
Okay, Robert says if you use
Yes.
no dig, you won't be ruining ruining
Ruining.
the soil with rototilling. Just add a few inches of compost.
Right, and it will cook down in, and you could just dig through it or put things in, and it will be great. One of the problems with rototilling every year is that the structure of the soil likes to just be loose and get air in it and just sit there. And if you rototill it, you rip all that apart. Time of day, I don't know, midday. Not in the hot afternoon, because you want to know it at, no, not in the very early morning, but maybe about, you know, a little bit closer to now, a little bit earlier than this. So you get a feel for, you know, you're worried about the lower temperature is the problem. So if it's got blazing sun at 4 in the afternoon, you're going to get a better temperature reading. And it doesn't fluctuate quite as much as the air, but I would go out earlier than hot afternoon. And if any of the others want to answer that question, that'd be great, because I'm not an expert on that very much.
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you also.
Oh, goody. Yes, thank you. I'll be slipping you your payment soon.
Okay, nailed it.
Yeah.
Other questions from anybody? Oh,
Yeah, it can be. It can be. The question was, if grass is growing there, is that a sign it's good dirt to grow? It grows, you know, here's the answer. You're going to need to get the grass off. And then what you're always going to want to know is if you've never had vegetable gardening there, you're going to have to fight the grass for a while. And the only answer you can possibly get is test your soil. And then you'll know.
hey, Clark, you got a question. Go for it.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello, Pete.
Hi. Hey, we've got raised metal beds. Is there a problem with them overheating? We've just had them 1 year. Of course, last year was the dome thing.
Yeah.
But
I think your only problem is if it gets in the sun and put your hand on it while you're weeding, you're going to burn your hand. I don't think it would transfer through all the dirt that well.
okay.
I mean, you're talking a physics question. The sun, the temperature on the metal, touching the soil, but will the soil transfer that heat very far through? I think if the size of your beds, I would say, you know, right near the very edge, maybe, but probably not in the middle.
All right.
Yeah.
We haven't really experimented with
And then I task you with discovering this summer and then telling us what the right answer is.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, there's that thought but when you think about cooking a pan on the stove, the pan is boiling hot, but the handle itself is cool. It's the same thing. Is the heat doesn't transfer very well in the soil. It takes a long time to move it that way. So,
But the only thing is, in pots, if you've got direct sun on dark pots, which are not as big as a raised bed, you're going to want to put a board up or something between the rays of the sun. I had to do that during the heat dome last year with all my potted, my deck plants.
Right. Or if you're in a heat dome and your plants are looking very bad, you might want to work up a shade for them. My garden, I couldn't possibly. I have 11 or 12 raised beds. So, but where I was during the heat dome, people were draping sheets over their plants to try to keep the leaves from actually burning directly, and that helps some. but we're just not going to have that again.
Right, absolutely. Here's hoping.
Okay, Brad has a question, and he
Oh.
says, my raised beds have a compost mix, and thus a soil test is a bit of an issue. I'm experiencing blossom end rot on my tomatoes. Can you speak to Epsom salt or some kind of other treatment?
Well, I cannot speak to Epsom salts because anything you use in your garden that comes from a package needs to say on the label how to use it in a garden. And Epsom salts don't come labeled that way. So that's the official answer on that. I had blossom end rot last year for the very first time, and it's a calcium problem. And it's a calcium uptake problem. Not that the calcium's not there, but the plant is somehow not taking it up. So when I researched this, they said that number one is probably an uneven watering issue. So there's that. And it was only certain varieties that had the blossom end rot. I had some miniature Romas, and they all were half rotted. And then I had one other kind that was more of a big boy kind of tomato, and they had it on the end, and I'd never had it before. So I think the problem was, oddly, I think we were watering it too much and then suddenly not. I think that was our problem. But yeah, I would recommend that you go on our website and read some of the different angles on that particular issue, because that is actually a fairly complex question. And you'd have to maybe do some soil testing, make sure you have what is needed, and look at your watering. I hope that was helpful at all.
I would also add lime. You buy a small bag of lime, it will last forever, and it's pretty cheap. I usually put a little bit of lime with when I plant my tomatoes, and I've never had a problem.
Yeah,
So,
and there's a Steve Solomon has, you can look this up on webpage. Steve Solomon's organic fertilizer that you can make yourself, and it has lime as one of the ingredients, and he recommends that you put a fertilizer like his, like a big handful underneath, and mix it into the dirt down underneath each of your tomatoes to help with this problem. So
and I've found and for the most part, that isn't the problem. The big problem here is inconsistent soil moisture, because it can happen to to zucchinis and summer squash and peppers for the same reason. If you keep your soil consistently moist, and Epsom salts don't add calcium to the soil.
No. And the other thing is that I was reading something just a couple days ago that said you lime this year for next year. That it takes a while for the lime to become available. I'm not sure if I'm saying that accurately, but there was some article I was reading that was saying that.
That's correct.
If it's not fertilized when you plant, or should it be repeated? A good question. If you have good, the problem is that the question is, should you fertilize at the beginning and should you continue? I just fertilize at the beginning myself. Oh, they make Steve Solomon's organic fertilizer and you can buy it? You have to understand that I stand in my greenhouse and I stand outside in a wheelbarrow and I'm mixing huge bags of all kinds of different things in this complicated recipe, and you can just go buy it? I didn't even know that. I'm sorry. Joke's on me. Yes, you should test your soil every year because it's fun and it's interesting to know. It's actually, you feel like a mad scientist. You're like digging the dirt up and you're drying it out and crumbling it and mixing it with water and putting drops of things in and cackling. Oh, sorry, that's just me. You get those little test tubes and then you compare your results. It's like, I'm back in biology in high school. And one of the things they recommend is testing multiple places, is that they should be separate tests, because if you mix the dirt from different places into one pile, then you're not sure where, if you had a problem, maybe it was only at one of those places. And the soil tests that you do yourself, I bought one at Lowe's. That's an excellent question, because it took me about half an hour and asking 3 people who looked it up on their little computer things. And finally someone said, it's in bay something or other. And I realized that they have a separate section for sort of organic-y and more not quick sale type of people who are more interested in more detailed things. And it's against the front wall at both Home Depot and Lowe's. It's like small little sections buried against the front wall and nobody's walking by. And it was in a little tiny slot, the soil tests. So you may have to ask for help. And I always kind of grab somebody to help me in Lowe's and Home Depot, and I don't let go of them. And they take me everywhere because I can never find anything in there. The soil test tells you how deep to dig, and my particular one said go down at least 4 inches and get the soil down there and try not to touch it. And then you had to dry it out. And then you had to put it in so much in the little test tube and so much water and then a little capsule of powder. And feel free to cackle like a mad scientist when you do it. It makes it much more fun.